USSR, September 1941. Hitler's army succeeds in blockading the city of Leningrad from military, medical, and industrial aid. What would follow was almost 900 days of constant bombardment, famine, and disease. On the 22nd of that month, Hitler gave a chilling decree. All offers of surrender from Leningrad must be rejected, as the problem of housing and feeding the people cannot and should not be solved by us. In this struggle for survival, we have no interest in keeping even a portion of the city's population alive. With no steady source of food, the diet of the typical Leningrad citizen would be in no uncertain terms radicalized. It's cold out there. Although not as cold as Leningrad in the winter. I often complain when it's 10 or 12 degrees, but in that great city, it could get down to minus 30. I can't even imagine that. The cold would have been oppressive and everywhere. Couple that with dwindling firewood supplies and fuel, and that's a recipe for complete desperation. And by the month of January, over 90,000 people were reported dead. It was at this time that food shortages were almost at their worst. People had turned to gangs to prey on the weak and weaker, and some of these gangs had actually turned to organized cannibalism. People were already being taken by the nature of things, by the cold and the hunger and disease. And now the added fear and paranoia as the people around you were possibly sizing you up as an actual meal and had gathered with others who think the same. That's terrifying, I think. The daily bread rations at the start of the siege was 600 grams for industrial workers, 400 grams for white-collar workers, and 300 grams for dependents. By November, it had dropped to 250 grams for industrial workers and 125 grams for office workers and dependents. Also, many of the refugees from the surrounding countryside and Baltic states couldn't gain access to rationing cards at all. Then in February, an increase in rations was announced. Any kind of celebration would have been short-lived, as soon after there was a complete collapse in the food distribution networks. This meant the citizens of Leningrad had no food at all for about a week, and this resulted in a massive spike in the death rate. Already weak from prolonged hunger, people died off in droves. Dogs and cats disappeared en masse. People would swap their pets to avoid eating their own. From wallpaper glue to the very shoes on their feet, the inedible became edible. Life was reduced to the thought, eat. As depressing as that sounds, and is, there seemed to be a need from a lot of the populace to maintain their humanity and not give in to depravity. Many people stated that the will to help others actually kept them alive. It's interesting that while some people would turn to an unbelievable darkness in these times, others would find an incredible kindness within themselves, and that kindness would be just as life-sustaining as a self-obsessed ruthlessness. At the end of the siege of Leningrad, almost half the population had lost their lives. And in a sense, I celebrate their grit by sharing a meal with them. This first one here is glue seasoned with bay leaves and a dash of vinegar. That tastes like vinegar, bay leaves, and glue. I can't imagine what these people were going through to have to try and sample this. I mean, everyone ate glue when they were young, but when you add bay leaves and vinegar to it, it actually makes it even more disgusting than I remember. Here's my attempt at leather broth. It smells like shoes, to be honest. Here I go. That's disgusting. That tastes like shoes boiled in water. That's physically repulsive. This is bread that's been adulterated with sawdust. As the grain supplies became lower and lower, the people in charge would put sawdust in instead of flour or the grain, and so therefore lessening the nutritional value. It's very hard, very tough. If you can see in the middle there, it looks pretty appetizing, I would say. You know what, that doesn't taste too bad. That just tastes like normal bread. Maybe Splinters of wood in there doesn't help anything. Oh, bit of a chunky bit there. The aftertaste isn't very good. It kind of tastes like a bench. The blockade was finally lifted in January 1944. This made the siege a full 872 days long. I find it truly astonishing what the human spirit and stomach can withstand when faced with a coming annihilation. That a city with a population of roughly 2.5 million could survive on so little for such a long time is practically unmatched in modern history. Though over 1.2 million perished, the city again began to thrive and would live on as a shining beacon to defiance in the face of apocalyptic devastation. Leningrad, now called St. Petersburg, endures.